does, like bring up the last week's sakes and put them in on kind of the right place, like in context. And then today is all about shubo, which is sake starters.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And how different types of starters will give you different styles and flavors and like historical context behind.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I can start sharing screen. Oh no.
Oh, let me wait.
Yeah, thank you.
That's multiple again. Everyone and there you go. You're free.
Great. So can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Someone posted on Instagram this week that it's kind of like a seance, that you're just constantly asking each other, can you hear me now? Or can you, can you see this now? There we go. Play
That's a very good way of describing.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? What about now? Or that commercial for the phone commercial. Yeah. Oh, okay. So we did change the calendar, so it's now February.
I saw that. I didn't want to make mention of it, but I did.
Yeah. Okay, so today is day 2 of Hakko Gakko. If anyone's listening, obviously people are listening, please. I hope that's the case. But for everyone that's listening, please don't take out your sakes quite yet. I know last time a few people said that the sakes got drunk or they got warm. So I'll let you know when we're going to pour them. Or if you have really good, self-control, then you can pour them and drink a little bit. But I doubt that's going to happen. So don't. Probably, yeah, because we're not around to like top up your glasses, unfortunately, without restaurants. Yeah. So today's class, what we want to go through is recap the things that we talked about last week, because they really are the kind of fundamentals of what we need to know in order to talk about the really weird, cool stuff. But also that's they're important they're there for a reason, right? And like laws are based around it for good cause. Yeah. Styles, categories, and what they taste like. Like I said, we'll talk about the 4 sakes from last week and put them in the grid, so to say, right? And then we talk about shubo, what it is, different categories, and what they taste like, and why some are really popular right now. 2 years ago when I was last in Japan, every single brewery that I visited was talking about this not new always, but a lot of them were trying out a new method for themselves, and it's a kind of like a back to basics approach. But yeah, everyone's really excited about this old method that we'll talk more about. So recap, there are 2 main ways to categorize sake, right? And one was the rice polish ratio that we talked about, why we remove the outer parts of the rice and how that contributes to the flavors. And then also about adding alcohol versus not adding alcohol and what influences these styles. Oh, I know. Okay, never mind. So shinpaku. This slide hopefully is kind of familiar, and the shinpaku was the white starch heart in the middle of the rice, of the sake rice, right? Not all rice grains have this. It's only the special ones, the chosen ones, or special styles of rice that have this shinpaku. But that's why they've been cultivated for almost 100 years in order to utilize, these characteristics for making sake. So the outside layers, right, they contain more fats, proteins, lipid, vitamins, all those things kind of mean nutrients, things that are kind of tasty and give you flavor, as I've written in this big red font. They give you flavor, but especially until really recently, they were called like unwanted or off flavors, right? These were things that gave it a little more harshness, a little more richness, maybe acidity, and they weren't really sought after. if you remember like the bubble economy in Japan in the 80s and 90s, everyone had a lot of money and they wanted to spend it large. My friend who is I think like maybe early 50s now, she said when she was living in Japan in the bubble economy, she was a university student and everyone had around her had like really nice cars, and the average spend for Valentine's Day from like a man to woman, very generic story, but was like something like $2,000. Yeah,
Crazy.
yeah.
That's
So you got to
crazy.
get like a really nice gift, and a night like and the Tiffany's heart-shaped necklace was the thing apparently when
Yeah.
she was in university. And then
Wow.
you had to go to a French or Italian restaurant, and then probably like a hotel room. But yeah, it was like a huge thing. So, anyways, during that time in Japan, people wanted purity, like the most polished sakes. Not the most polished because that wasn't really readily available yet, but they really wanted sakes that didn't taste like a lot. Looking back in hindsight, so the sushis, the table sakes for like everyday drinking, and then the daiginjos, which also didn't taste like that much because they were so polished, and the style of brewing. That's what they were looking for at the time.
Mm.
Polishing, again, this is the same slide as last week. We have brown rice all the way down to 50, and that just keeps going. Like every time you look up like sake news, there's someone that's like, we've got a 18%. And again, the lowest polish is 0.8, I think, right? And that's the absolute zero. So yeah, the more you take away, the cleaner the flavors become.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then based on this, we have our minimum requirements that give us the right to call it something. That doesn't always mean that the brewers say, okay, we're going to call it this, right? As we'll see in a bit. But these are the numbers that we have to remember. And I don't think I mentioned last time, but 70% Honjozo or Junmai, right? Honjozo sakes do have added alcohol, and they have to be polished to at least 70. Now, Junmais are usually around 70 or a little bit less, but they don't have to be. So Junmai's, since 2002, brewers do not need to polish to any number.
Okay.
So it can be 100%, it can be 90, it can be 60, whatever. But apparently the big companies, they lobbied and wanted to be able to call their sakes Junmais, even if they only polished it to like 80%. So
Got it.
politics and, yeah.
Politics.
Behind the scenes stuff going on there. Yeah. But that also means that we have some cool junmais that are like 90, 80%, and they're really delicious. They can be floral, they can be like rich and earthy, but we have a little bit of like a lot of wiggle room actually with junmais now. Oh, really like the table wine kind of analogy.
Mm.
Yeah. So these words ginjo, daiginjo, honjozo junmai, adding alcohol or not, I put it into a graph. You might have seen some versions of this in other places to sort out the information, hopefully. So on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, we have 3 each, right? And at the bottom, we have this question, do we add alcohol or not? Aruten is a result of like in Japan, they like to shorten words a lot and smash them together as well. So I think like, Marie Kondo, the organizing lady, who's on Netflix now, is like marikon instead of, no, konmari, sorry, because in Japanese last name is first, right? So that sort of thing. So aruten is short for arukoru tenka, which means to add. So aruten, if you want to impress, I don't know who, but if you want to impress somebody, you can say, is this sake aruten? Which means
impress everyone. I do want to
added alcohol. Yeah, some people might be impressed. It depends on your crowd. Yeah. So whether or not we decide to do this action, like whether we choose to do it or not, is going to give you the different sides, right? And I put a arrow there: aromatics, refinement, simplicity, purity. So as we go up from bottom to up, right? We got, let's say on the right-hand side, honjozo, and then a ginjo, then daiginjo. As we go up, the polish number, the rice polish ratio goes down. I'll show that in a sec. But also the aromatics are going to go up, the prettiness of it, and then also the refinement. But what people call purity is also, I think, very much another word for simplicity, right? So you take away more, and as we remember, if you polish the rice, you take away these nutrients. Those are flavors. So what you get in purity, you also get in simplicity. Like you just get clean, clear, like sweet often as well, because there's like lack of acidity and proteins to balance that out, right? So this is like the big kind of breakdown of the 6 styles of sake. We're talking about these are premium sakes, right? So if it doesn't fall into any of this, it's a table sake. At the bottom, so the hand, yeah, is the junmai, right? So on the side, on the left hand side with the hand, so we're not adding alcohol, and this is a choice. So we go, okay, we're not going to add alcohol. Then we have the word junmai come up 3 times. So junmai, pure rice, and we have junmai ginjo, junmai dai ginjo, depending on the polish and the style as well, and like the choices of the brewer. And then on the right hand side, we have chosen to add alcohol, so we get the honjozo, ginjo, and dai ginjo. And so same polish numbers for ginjo or junmai ginjo, but the added alcohol, if you remember last week, when you add alcohol, you're gonna get like floral lifted, lighter palate texture as well, and like richness, right?
Sorry to interrupt quickly.
Yeah.
If you're buying sake and if you see those characters, is that like you'll see those characters on the bottle if it perhaps it isn't the descriptor isn't in English? Like
yeah, you'll see these words. The big problem often is that these words are stylized a lot, like they look like calligraphy, or not look like they're done in calligraphy. So sometimes it's hard to pick these out. But if you can even pick out, like dai, the character for big, there's not that many places dai is used other than dai ginjo, so, or junmai, these two are a little bit easier. But for in Canada, we do, as importers, have to label them to some degree. So we do have that. But yeah, if you're in Japan or like, I don't know, Hong Kong or something, and you're at a cool shop, these words will.
If you're going to Japan, and you want to drink some sake, spend some time remembering what those characters look like, so that you can see them on the label.
And it's actually it's 7 characters, I think, that you have to pick out. Junmai, Daijinjo. Yeah, so some of these are repeated characters, right? So not too bad. Yeah, and then also we're gonna we've tasted 4 sakes that kind of fit into this world, so you can say, well, I kind of know that I like this ginjo style. Even if you can't read it, someone's gonna be like, okay, I can find you a ginjo.
Cool, I like it. Cool.
So why do we get aromatics, refinement, simplicity, purity? So the polish we talked about, right? So less nutrients, we get these lighter, cleaner, purer flavors that also equate to sweeter, because you get all of this concentration of starches that become sugar to alcohol. If you have any sugars left, which you usually do, then you're going to get that sweetness as well, right? And then ginjo styles, the big thing is not the polish actually at all. It's about the aromatics of like pear, apple, lychee, and how we get to those flavors and notes is the use of special yeast. So ginjo yeast, or there's a specific category of yeast that are called ginjo yeast, and they are really they perform the way that brewers want them to through temperature control, right? So like a lager, we said last week, if you use warm temperature fermentation for a lager, you're going to get something different. Yeah. So this is the why of why these things happen. And this is a little messy, so hopefully we can kind of read this. So the graph, the table is the same, right? Took out the Japanese. So right hand side, adding alcohol again, left hand side, not. Right, and then I put the sakes that we tasted last week. Yeah. So the honjozo urakasu. Sorry, let's start with sake number 1 that we tasted. Was the mutsuhasen, the really aromatic, like pretty one, the very first one, and that was actually a tokubetsu junmai polished at 55%, right? But I wanted to show it because it was the most ginjo out of all of these. So they said, okay, we're not going to call it a ginjo for whatever reason. They probably have a ginjo that is quite, maybe more polished, more aromatic, who knows. But tokubetsu means special, right? So you want to say it is like your partner on Valentine's Day, you're special to me. You can also say tokubetsu. You're very tokubetsu. Yeah. So tokubetsu junmai just means usually that there's a little extra polish or maybe a different kind of rice or whatever, but like a lot of the times it's about the polish. So tokubetsu junmai, and the fun thing is that in Japan right now, a lot of the tokubetsu junmais, it's like this other in between the lines category that allows the brewers to make kind of whatever they want with it. But often you're going to get tokubetsu junmais that are showing like ginjos. So that was 55%. Then the second sake we had was the urakasumi honjozo, right? The really like light, fresh, session, like crushable sake. And that's on the bottom right. And that is 65%. So honjozos do have added alcohol, right? And then they're polished at least 70%, but this one is 65. Yeah. Sake number 3 was a junmai, 60%, which is the requirement for ginjo, but it's totally not a ginjo sake. It's like earthy and aged and kind of caramel and earthy. So that is in the junmai world. Yeah, they can't really call it a ginjo because it's almost like it's a contract or like a promise to the brewer, to the person drinking it. Right? If you say it's ginjo and then you give them the tengumai imajin, people are gonna go, okay, there's something wrong with this.
Yeah.
Making a statement. Yeah. And then the last sake was the Matsumoto, which he didn't even bother calling it anything. He's like, this is Yamada Nishiki, and this is my Shuhari line. But we know it's 50% polish because we wrote it ourselves. Like, no, I get it, but it's 50%.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, it is. So daiginjo level, you could call it a daiginjo, but he does not call it that. That's not his style. So it's in this gym. It's definitely a junmai, and it's in the ginjo world. So I put it there, but it's something that kind of he doesn't call it that. Yeah.
Cool. I like this. I like it puts things into context
Yeah.
to each other. Great.
Again, the ish, right? So junmais don't have to be 70%. They don't have to be 60. They can be anything. So there are sakes that are made with brown rice now, and those are junmai. There's no other word for that. Yeah. Same thing as daiginjo. Even if you polish to 23, like dasai, or to less than 1%, it's still a daiginjo. There's no like other category for that. They might call it like the ultra something or like those names, but it's still a daiginjo. So now we go into the shubo part. And shubo, the top, I have the very top bullet, I have the characters for it. So shubo, the first character, the first two is sake mother, and then there's a dot, and the third character is from moto. So shubo and moto, we're talking about the same thing, right? And shubo, sake mother, we're talking about the E starter. So hopefully that's kind of makes sense. If you make kombucha or ginger bug or sourdough bread, any of those kinds of things, you'll kind of get the concept, I think. And then moto, the character on the right, it means the origin. The origin, I think, is probably the best word, but this is a very specific word for sake. When you see that character on the left half, that's always in reference to words that have to do with sake. So this is only used for sake. If you use this for like the origin of life, that's not going to work. It's only for the sake origin, right? But they're interchangeable again. So shubo or moto are the same thing, and it's the sake mother. So this is where we need a healthy population of yeast, right? So it's in a smaller container usually. Smaller means more control, temperature control. Your atmosphere is controlled. What you're putting in is just easier to maintain. So we do it in a smaller tank, and you can even see in this picture there's two like tubes I don't know, lines going in, and these are thermometers going in to measure what the temperature is, right? And we need in here to be a really solid population of yeast, or else if we don't have enough, then we're going to have incomplete fermentations. And I don't know necessarily what incomplete fermentations taste like personally, but I've been told like it's an off flavor, and like people who do this for a living know, oh, that's like incomplete fermentation. So you get like bitterness, I imagine, and just like a different kind of flavor profile. Yeah. And the different styles. So we have two main categories we're going to talk about and break down. And then even within that, we have variants within it. And then we have styles that go back to the 1400s and things that are a little bit more modern now. No. Okay. This is me with my M4 sake starter. Okay, so why do we need it again and again? The Shivel starter or the yeast starter is so that we have enough yeast, right? This way of starting out with a more concentrated batch before we put this becomes a seed to put into your main fermentation. This is like insurance to make sure that you have enough. And so in the Shivel, in the starter, is where we're going to add yeast. And it's like 90% of the time it is still added. And I'll show a photo here. On the left this is cultivated yeast. They're vials, and you can see the numbers on them, like K1401, K180. And so these are yeast that have been what's the word I'm looking for? Have been made pure in the lab, and we use this, like you buy it and you put this into your sake fermentation, right? So most of the time it is not natural yeast or ambient yeast. There is more of this trend towards that, as you can imagine, but that's not the majority of sakes, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what we want is the high population of pure sake yeast, the most that we can have, so that the other things like other yeasts or other microorganisms don't take over our fermentation.
Love it.
And this is Ayaka at Yamagata Masamune. Yeah, she was there last, like not this past winter, obviously.
I do want to say.
So she's at Yamagata Masamune, which is the sake number 2 that we're going to have tonight. And this is their Shivel. I'm kind of surprised that they let her like in here for as long as they did, it looks like, because it's pretty sensitive, right? Like if you get things in here, like people breathing on it, for example, things could happen. You can't eat natto, and what's the other thing you can't eat? There's like, if you have natto, which, fermented beans with all like the wild good bacteria and stuff, then apparently it can overpower sake yeast as well.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, this is a video I was showing a sec. So Shivel making is in a smaller tank usually, right? And again, because you can have temperature control better, and also the concentration of koji in here is quite high compared to what we do in the rest of the fermentation. And this is the stage where we add yeast, right? Nowhere else do we add yeast. We only add it here, make it grow or make it multiply. And then this becomes split usually into multiple batches. So this tank that Ayaka's putting the pull into most likely will become like 2-ish batches. And this will get split. Yeah. Yeah, the Shivel room is usually in a different part of the brewery. So if this Shivel room is the same as the other fermentation going on, or like in the rice steaming room, then your temperatures and things like that kind of fluctuate too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And underneath the tanks, you have sometimes like candles. It's almost like, when winemakers are battling frost, they have candles yes. In Burgundy. But even that, or like just a light fixture underneath the tanks will raise it enough to keep it going, right? Because you need to like hover in a temperature where it's not too warm, but it's not going to die.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is... hopefully going to play. So you can see it's quite thick.
Yeah.
Right. It's a lot of work to do this process. It's the rest of the brewery. Yeah, so this is in a different part of the brewery, and because this is for Kimoto sake, it needs to be definitely done in a different part of the brewery. Yeah. Okay. There's two main ways that we classify the starters, and one is sokujo and the other is kimoto. These two methods are basically what make up all of the sake starters that we know of for now. And sokujo makes up a lot, like it's most of it. And sokujo, the characters break down to fast fermentation, and this is a method that was perfected in the early 1900s, around 1910, 1911, and it's the main method. I keep saying that. Okay. But in here, in this method, what we're doing is we're using lactic acid. So you can buy lactic acid anywhere, well, not anywhere actually, but like not a, superstore, but you can buy lactic acid and it's just a liquid, and you take a very small amount, you put it into your starter and you lower the pH. And by doing this, you have a really clean environment. And at that point, well, at the same time, you add your yeast and it's just really solid. You're not going to have a messed up batch, right? So why the early 1900s? Because they had to figure out what lactic acid was and what lowering the pH meant, right? And what yeast you want to work and to function over everything else. It's reliable, and like many innovations and technologies that were developed for sake, this was something that the tax office people developed because they wanted breweries to make more sake and make more taxes. Kind of like the LCBO. Yeah, not really. The temperature is higher, right? And when we have a higher temperature, we also have more reliability. Things don't. It keeps going. So because the lactic acid was added, we have this like really clean environment anyways. And then that plus the 20 to 25 degrees Celsius fermentation, not fermentation, sorry, the starter, we have a really good balance of clean, but the temperatures to kind of push the process going, right? Because if it's low, then it's going to stall and it's going to stop. Yeah. And the average for sokujo is around 2 weeks. So 2 weeks for the starter. This isn't the fermentation. This is still the starter where we're trying to get the yeast to get going. And then we have another full, at least about a month usually, for the main fermentation to happen. But we're just talking about starters right now. Then kimoto is the other group of starters. And kimoto, the characters mean nama, moto. Nama means raw, and then moto is the character for starter again. And this is the main method that was used until the early 1900s. But this, it's actually not a legally defined word apparently, this or yamahai, but the big thing is that there's no lactic acid added, right? So what we have instead is we have ambient lactic acid bacteria that creates lactic acid over time, and also things like other things go up enough that we have a safe environment in about 2 weeks in, 10 days in. And at that point, we can add our yeast. And again, it's not natural yeast. We're still pitching yeast for the most part, not always, but for the most part, we're adding yeast, but we're only doing it when it's safe to do so. And in the kimoto method versus the sokujo, the safe time comes because of the natural factors. Yeah. And we're also using poles to mash it. In the picture, you can see on the left, it's flat, and that's the one we're using to mix and mash. Actually, you'll see a video in a second of this pole being used to mash the rice into paste. And this comes from a time when brewers actually didn't know exactly how fermentation worked. So they thought that they had to physically mash it for the rice to melt and dissolve and become sake.
Wow.
And this takes around 4 weeks, and the temperature is really cold. So it was really perfected in areas that were colder, so like Akita and like north. If you did this where it's warm, you'd probably be it wouldn't work so well, right? Bad things would happen, like smells and things that you don't want would start appearing. So cold temperatures is definitely needed, and you're using these poles to mash it. The big difference is, right, lactic acid, whether we add it or not, I asked the brewer to let me lick some lactic acid, and as you can imagine, it's just like horribly tart and sour. Yeah. But it's the difference of how protection is created. Sokujo is by intervention and by doing it as brewers, and then the Kimoto method is through temperature control, so lower temperatures. You're also going to use less water, and because it's less water, you have a thicker, like what Ayaka was mixing. It's really dense, right? So if you take like jam or anything that has high sugars, it takes a lot more for jam to go bad, unless it's in my fridge, because I've done that quite a few times. You have a lot of sugar and you're going to have a harder time letting it spoil. And so that's another way that brewers back in the day would control the safety of it, things. Yeah. And the time that you spend, like Kimoto, as you can see, is 4 weeks versus 2 weeks. It's a lot more labor intensive, takes more time. So for quite a while, until maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, it was people didn't make that much Kimoto. But now it's super trendy. And there's all sorts of Kimotos being made. And there's also people who just never stopped making Kimoto. And the flavor profile difference is pretty large. Last week we tasted 4 sakes. All 4 of them were sokujo. They're fast fermentation. And then today all 3 of them are kimoto.
Oh.
So you'll see that there is a very different texture and complexity and the real layers that you get when you do this method. So the barrel here is actually empty, but this is Terada Honke. So Terada-san, he makes brown rice sake, and his sakes look amber. Like they look very, very yellow. I think he calls them like golden amber whatever's. But yeah, he also does Kimoto method, right? I went sideways for some reason. The video was on, right? And the music was on?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So there is no sake in that thing. Do not like, it's not the Emperor's Clothes room. There is no sake in there. But what they're doing is just showing us the process of mashing it. And there's traditional songs in kind of these areas where they do this. And so he's showing us. In the back, actually, for a moment, like my flex moment is the guy in the back is Pierre from Flamandia Bernier.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and I was here with from
Flex,
which is really cool. There was like a group of champagne producers all listening to this to this method. So the tank itself is smaller too, right? And these producer, there's a name for them called hangiri, and they are smaller so that instead of the tank that Ayaka was using, for example, that gets split into all these smaller wooden barrels. And because it's more concentrated, it's safer, but it's also easier to work with. Right? So this was the method that producers used to break down the rice physically, because they really thought that they had to mash it in order to melt it. But then they realized later on, if you look on the Kimoto in the middle, there is a version called Yamahai now. And you've probably seen that word maybe. And this is from 1909. And I call it the lazy version because they figured out, hey, we don't need to do the mashing because it is a lot of work to do. But by making the temperature slightly warmer, you can get away with not mashing.
yes.
Because the yeast, as well as like the koji, that the strengths of all these things are good. especially probably by that time, it was a lot more reliable. They realized we don't need to do the mashing part, right? But Yamaha and Kimoto, that's kind of like the big difference between these two. And nowadays, separating Kimoto from Yamaha is really, really hard. Like some producers, instead of using that wooden barrel and that pole, they'll use plastic bags and they'll like knead it. So if you make like shake and bake chicken and you put powder in and chicken in and shake it, that's the kind of like thing that some brewers use to really knead the rice. So whether we call that Yamaha or Kimoto is just like very semantics, right?
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Your volume went down a little bit.
Oh, okay.
People can't hear you.
Oh no. Okay.
They can hear you, but it's just softer. I don't know what you did. Sorry.
Maybe because the uh, the song was playing. Is it better now? Maybe not. Let's see. Let's see if this is better. How about now?
Oh, wonderful.
Okay. So
Okay.
so the Kimoto method was with the mashing. I'll just repeat a little bit of that. So whether we call it Kimoto or Yamahai is really hard to differentiate, right? So there's producers who do Kimoto, they call it that, but they're actually taking the rice, the shubo, they're splitting up not into the smaller wooden barrels, but into plastic bags, and then they're kneading it.
Yep.
So if we call that Kimoto or Yamahai is really up to the brewer what they want to call it, right? But the thing is, Yamahais have a reputation for being a little more rich and perhaps savory, and then Kimotos, especially now, are much cleaner and tighter and not like umami or sweeter at all, right? So it really, whether it's Yamahai or Kimoto, I wouldn't get too caught up on that. But both Yamahai and Kimoto, there's no lactic acid added, and there might be a physical process or not.
And so Kimoto and Yamaha just refer to how the starter is prepared.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So you can have an added alcohol Kimoto or a Junmai Kimoto. You can have a Ginjo Kimoto, Daiginjo, all of it, right? So the way that we do the starter doesn't, dictate what that final sake is going to be. You can still polish it, use Ginjo yeast, whatever you want to do. There's also a variant called high temperature Yamahai. So you can do this no lactic acid added version, but you use high temperatures, and that shortens your shibo days. There's like so many things we can do within this. And then sokujo on the left, so fast fermentation. This is again, like the majority of sakes are made in this fast fermentation method. And we're adding lactic acid, right at the beginning when we add the yeast at the same time. And even within that, we have mid temperatures, I wrote tokujo, sokujo, 25 to 30. Wow, I'm really not doing well with this one point. And then the high temperature sokujo, you can do 40 to 50 degrees, right? 40 to 50 is quite warm, as you can imagine, and then like it's hot to the touch. But by the hot temperature, whether it's Yamahai or sokujo, the big thing is that you're going to have an environment where wild things that you don't have a chance to survive.
Yep.
So these are usually done in areas where it's not very cold. So if it's cold, they have the cold temperatures as their protection for brewing and against spoilage. Whereas warm regions in the south, they were the ones that said, okay, well, we can't use cold temperatures. And now with not technology, but like with electricity, you can do that pretty easily. But back in the day, that would have been much harder. But to raise the temperature is easier and less cost than cooling it down. You can see in this photo again here, they're using ice for this. So now with ice makers and again electricity, that's super easy. We can do this better, but warm temperature gives you also a different style that you can play with. And then we have more ancient styles. So Mizumoto, Bodaimoto, or this more ancient category, these definitely are within the Kimoto umbrella. So underneath Kimoto, we have Yamahai, and then we also have the more ancient methods like Mizumoto, which Mizu means water, and then Bodaimoto is actually the name of a temple. So
they're both pretty much the same thing, kind of except for where they were made. And Bodaimoto, it was made in a place called Shodakuji in Nara Prefecture. And this is where the god of sake is supposed to live. There's like 3 temples or shrines where the god of sake lives, apparently, many, many places. But the thing here is that we're using partially raw rice. So some raw rice and then some cooked rice go into water, and that water gets soured. And then you get this all the websites that I read talk about this like extreme intense smell. And it's supposed to be like yogurt, but just like much, much funkier. So you get that lactic acid bacteria, right? That you can imagine. So you put your cooked rice and your raw rice into the water, you sour it, you kind of prepare it, and then you go on with the rest of your fermentation.
Oh.
There's very few in the market for many reasons. One of them just logistics, but Mizumoto, I think Stew as well as Bathurst Local, they carry a sake that is made with Mizumoto, which I can post later because the name, I can't think of the name right now. But, Hanatomoe, I'll write that in the Discord later. But Hanatomoe is the name of the sake, and as soon as you open it, you know it's not Sokusho for sure. Like it's really wild. But the kind of confusing part is that sake, even though it's Mizumoto, it's also, I think it's Nama. So sometimes you don't know if it's the Nama intensity, that like raw unpasteurized smell, or it's a combination in this case, I think. Yeah. But you get some very, very intense flavors and aromas. But Shodakuji temple water was where they found out that this particular strain of lactic acid bacteria lives. And so since about like 15 years ago, there's a few brewers who've gone together in Nara to really research bringing this back. So Genten Kaiki means like back to basics. And a lot of brewers are researching and going through like historical works to see what they can do with it. And now we have science on our side, so we can do, like things that are religious and historical plus science to make better versions even. This is in the middle here, we have Amabuki. So this is a brewery in Saga, so in the very south in Kyushu, right? And Kyushu is quite warm. It's closer in like latitude to Taiwan, or in that world. But this, you can see they've covered it with blankets, and there's a heater underneath too. And this is the hot temperature sokujo that I was talking about. So this is, he said, about 50 degrees Celsius. And that temperature allows the koji to work really well and the yeast to also work, but you're also too hot for other things like other wild yeast and bacteria to proliferate in there. So this kind of looks homey, like homemade, but this is a pretty well-known bigger producer who does it in this method. And the picture on the right, you can see that the plastic there is like there's condensation because it is that warm. Right? So hot temperature sokujo, we can also have hot temperature yamahai. And there's a sake we just started working with called Kidoizumi that does hot temperature yamahai. And you can find out some of their sakes at like Uncle Mikey's and Sakai Bar and Bathurst, all the weirdo sake places.
I love that.
And the methods are, again, independent of style, category, and what the brewer intended with those techniques and methods, right? So whether we use hot temperature sokujo or hot temperature yamahai or everything in between, you can still make ginjos, daiginjos, honjozos, all of it, right?
That's I never knew that was a distinction, and it kind of especially helped me understand the terminology that you see on the back of a label a little bit more, that they're describing two separate parts of the process, not subsections, and yeah, it's great. This is wonderful.
The combinations of things can give you hints, but it's still like, because we're in this like real critical place in sake history where brewers are playing around a lot. It is harder and harder, I think, to say, oh, that must taste like this, you know?
Mhm.
So the big question is, what do they actually taste like, right? Acidity is a huge part of Kimoto and Yamahai, as well as the Bodaimoto and the Mizumoto. So that whole Kimoto world, I said that acidity is a real defining feature. And you get different combinations of lactic acid, maybe even citric acid, if you use a particular koji, for example. But you can also get glutamic acid. Glutamic acid, of course, gives you umami, but I said be careful because it's easy to kind of go, okay, Yamahai Kimoto's equals more umami, more savory, more rich, and that's not an equal, that's not the correlation, right? So we do get more acidity, and then we also get more depth, richness, complexity, but the umami that sometimes is quite rich and like prominent, a lot of times that comes from aging. So that third sake we had last week, the Tengamai, was really like umami laden, right? Like super soy sauce and dashi and that kind of flavor profile. And someone actually said, "Is this Yamahai?" And it is. That wasn't, but also those notes you often do kind of people do put together with Kimoto, but there it's not. That's actually a function of aging and the temperature that you use for aging as well. So Kimotos and Yamahais, when they come fresh from the tank or before, as they're being pressed, it's very, very juicy and very clean. So people back in like between 1400s to like early 1900s were making some very clean sakes, but they were using like natural lactic acid bacteria. But then that combined with aging, as well as maybe if it's nama and it's not pasteurized, so it changes. There's like biological things that happen that can give you some color, funkiness, smokiness, caramel kind of notes. But that isn't necessarily a thing that you get with Kimoto Yamahai. All the brewers will tell you if you get all those things when the sake is fresh, something's gone wrong, most likely, right? There are people who say, okay, well, I'm just like super hands off. I didn't do anything, like the guy that was singing. That could be the reason. But most times, if you get that like savoriness, now it's becoming more accepted. But still, there might be some things happening like biologically that you don't need to have. Yeah. Another portion is the depth that you get, the richness and the body. They're delicious warmed often, and hopefully on day 4, so on the last week, we can try some warmed. And you get lots of complexity, lots of layers and textures. And complexity is really hard to define, right? That's the whole point of complexity. So you've got all these different things going on, and they are hopefully harmonious. And yeah, they're fun, and that's why brewers are experimenting with them. So one thing that I always get with Yamahai Kimoto, I think, and Bodaimoto Mizumoto is this, as you can imagine, like lactic acid. So this like yogurty creaminess, sometimes a smokiness that could be from aging too. But yeah, I get that like rich texture that you wouldn't get with sokujo. It's almost like whole milk or cream versus what is that, like skim milk. Yeah, get a very different texture with it. So tasting. So as I promised, we'll take like, I don't know, 3 minutes, however minutes it takes for me to go get the sakes too.
That's a long time.
3 minutes is a long time. Okay, so maybe like 60 seconds.
I feel like you should. I feel like you should be able to get to your fridge faster than 3 minutes.
Okay, so we have like 30 seconds. Then we'll go get the sakes.
Then we'll taste some sake. I thought I'd bring my fancy glass.
Ooh, you got the Junmai glass. Nice.
Because if the people who were in that sake seminar who got this, what else am I going to do with it if not to drink?
Yeah, it's very fancy. I know they look like ginormous like coupe glasses.
I get the bottle. I'm a big boy. Rico, after this, we taste this one. There's a few questions in the chat, and maybe we could go over them
Yeah.
after we've tasted.
Mhm.
So 1, 2, 3.
I hate this glass so much.
That's a very yeah, very very fancy glass. There was quite a few brewers who got together. I'm not sure if anyone heard the story, but who got together with the Riddell to make that Junmai glass. But that's after the Daiginjo. There was a Daiginjo glass that first came out. Then that's the Junmai one. Daiginjo glass is extremely similar to like Sauvignon Blanc glasses, so you could probably just use that personally.
I don't mind the shape. It's just really weird and like heavy. Like it's machined kind of thick, so it doesn't.
It's a little hard to swirl, no? Is kind of what I remember.
Yeah.
Like you look like, I don't know, James Bond swirling martini glass.
Yeah, it is. It's like a weird, clunky martini glass. But it's
Yeah. Okay, so okay. So sake number 1, this is Otokoyama, and it's a Kimoto Junmai. So again, all 3 of the sakes that we're tasting today are Yamahai, or they're under the Kimoto category, right? And hopefully all 3 of them are quite different. So even though they're in the same starter world, what happens when they use this style is very different. So that's the point of showing this, right? So Tokoyama, this is from Hokkaido. Did you actually pinpoint Asahikawa on the map? Because I was very impressed. Wow. That's right. Yeah, it's quite far north, even in Hokkaido, and it's very cold. And that also probably has something to do with this style. But I learned the other day that I think this was a brewing license that was like many generations ago, brought from the main island up to Hokkaido. So there's very few craft breweries in Hokkaido, actually.
I have a museum that you can go to. I learned that.
Tokoyama? Oh, cool.
That's what the star. If you use my map to take you to this place, it will take you to their sake museum because I couldn't find on the internet where their brewery was.
Oh.
So if you follow the star and it leads you to a museum, I apologize. It's sake. It is sake brewery, so you'll be able to try some sake and maybe ask them to direct you to
the brewery's website. The English is really good. No, like it's really well done, actually. Yeah. So this is Kimoto Junmai, Tokubetsu Junmai. I couldn't find the rice, what the rice is. So I think it's probably table rice. Often if they don't specifically say, because with like Yamada Nishiki, they're extremely proud to say that. So I think this is table rice. And you can smell the nose. It's not funky. It's not earthy. It's like really, there's a little umami maybe. There's a little saltiness. But when you swirl, I think there's this kind of sharpness that comes up. It's almost kind of ginjo. It's probably not a ginjo nose, but more like this like alcohol that kind of comes up. I'm glad I chose that. Okay. So Tokubetsu Junmai 60%. So Junmai is usually around 70%, right? Give or take. Well, this is 60%, so ginjo polish. It's quite fruity on the palate. Like I get kind of like peach and stone fruits, a good amount of acidity. And Hokkaido is very much a seafood place. Kieran was saying that someone, who was it, said that my Instagram account is basically a fish account. That I talk about.
It's actually a food account, and it's actually, I really enjoy it.
Thank you. It's a lot of seafood. But yeah, so my mom's side of the family being from Hokkaido, and I spent all my summers in Hokkaido. It's a lot of seafood and seaweed and like eating in general. But
I'm
being
going to quickly, people are asking where in Hokkaido this is, so I'm going to quickly put my map up.
yeah, okay.
You can find it, and then we can switch back over.
Okay.
We can share multiple windows. I didn't know that, but
Oh, really?
that's where it is.
Yeah. So yeah. So the very southern part of Hokkaido is where my grandmother is, and it's not warm, but it's probably warmer than Asahikawa. Yeah, I tried to go there like winter 2019, and my grandmother almost screamed at me and said that's too dangerous to drive there. So it's like very, like the airport in Hakodate, it's called an international airport, quote unquote, and I think it goes to Korea and Russia. So it's kind of that same part of Asia, like in terms of temperature and geography, it's up there.
I mean, technically, that's international. I
It
understand.
is. Yeah, I'm not making fun of my grandmother's airport, but it's not like it's going to France or anything. It doesn't have to be, I guess. Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
So really clean. But if you compare this with a Sokujo Junmai sake, there's a lot more like depth and profile, flavor profile going on. Oh, let's see, I need to go back to my. There it is. Okay, yeah. And this, you could warm it, but I think I really like it at this temperature. The sakes that you want to warm, we'll talk more about that coming weeks, are the ones that have a little more richness usually. And when you warm sake, you get more sweetness to come out. It mellows out a little bit too. But if you're going to get more sweetness and more mellowness, you really need acidity to back that up, right? So, or else you just get flabby and just you don't want to drink a lot of it. Yeah. So yeah, that's the bottle. So this the 1.8 is only at Sakai bars. If you want to drink a big one, you have to go to Stu's. Yeah.
Like, this is intimidating to drink. But I guess it lasts longer, so you can kind of keep it in your fridge for a bit longer, which is it's obviously what I've done because I portioned it in my kitchen, all your sake is in my kitchen. So, and it's tasting great. So it's wonderful.
And I think there's a little bit of bitterness and like astringency. Yeah. So the sokujos are going to be just like clearer, and yeah, less layers. That's a generalization, but definitely kimotos as a whole just have a lot more going on. There's a few more questions that kind of go back, but Christopher says, would purity in ginjo and lack of nutrients and off flavors be comparable to congeners in distillation? I actually don't know what congeners are, but like, are they off? Like, are they by distilling more, you remove more flavors, I guess? Okay. Anyways, but it's a little different because it's a fermentation, a brewing fermentation. So I don't know if in distillation, if you take your, like, I don't know, base ingredient, let's say it's like rye, and then what you would do to clean up the flavors. But yeah, in sake, if you take off more of the outside layers and more of the nutrients, then you're going to have less of the proteins and flavors, right? So you have just clean starch, which becomes sugar, it's a carbohydrate. And then Nancy, why you made the Matsumoto the last sake in the tasting? So yeah, day one I did the Matsumoto in the last one. The reason was because it's not classified and he doesn't declare what it is. I wanted to put it in the at the end, where after we talked about the categories and what those things mean, but then Matsumoto being not calling himself that. You know? He has a sake called No Title as well. So it's really all about not wanting to be put into a square. Yeah. He's a star and he just wants to like do his thing.
Labels are ridiculous, but
Yeah.
I absolutely know that winemaker who's like, we don't tell you We do what we do. What's in the bottle
Yeah.
is what we do.
And as like a musician, you know, he's kind of like judge it as a piece, not as individual parts. Yeah. So Chris apparently means volatile. Yeah. So volatility, I don't think so. I mean, again, I don't know enough about distillation, but I don't think it's volatile as much. Actually, with like ginjos and daiginjos, especially the added alcohol ones are where you can get more of those kind of volatile esters. So Celia, does going over a certain degree of temperature during fermentation affect the aromas of the sake? Yeah, if you go over for the fermentation at a certain temperature, where if it stops working, like if it's over 60 degrees, it will stop things from working, right? So the pasteurization temperature for sake is around 65 degrees usually, and that's a temperature that you stop yeast and enzymes from working. So if you go over that during your fermentation, you would stop your fermentation. Yeah. And then the aromas, yeah, I think you would have like dead yeast cells and things before you actually wanted those and before you press them out quickly. So I think you'd have that. Follow coolers. Yeah, so higher temperatures, you get more intensity, and also you get there's like a healthier, I guess, a healthier fermentation, whereas a cooler fermentation is more controlled, but the yeast work with those temperatures in different ways too. So apparently, ginjo yeasts, they work when they're subject to really cold temperatures that they are with ginjo, they're struggling, and when they're struggling, they give off these aromas. It's like a little abusive, yeah, but a little sadistic. But yeah, they often brewers call it ametomuchi, so candy and whip. Yeah, so you have to give it enough sugars and like the right environment to keep going. Sorry, right before Valentine's Day, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doug wanted to know, does the price go up the more it is polished, or is it more about the brewer that gets the price of the value of a bottle?
I think brewers wish it was the latter, but still, it's the more polished sakes, the more polished rice, right? Sakes get priced higher because maybe if you only have 23% left, like Dasa is a good one because it goes 45 something, then 23. I can't remember the middle number right now, but those are polished numbers, and the 23 is definitely the most expensive. Yeah.
And Heather wants to know what the name of the wooden vessel they do the mashing is called.
Oh, the mashing is called, that it's called hangiri. Han means half, and giri, I'm not quite sure what the character is, but hangiri. Yeah. Did you see that Netflix like TV show? Not Birth of Sake, out that one too, but there is a giri something. Anyways, it's like British Netflix show.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Is it about sake?
Sake, actually. Sorry. Just the word is the same. Okay. Now, the second sake is Yamagata Masamune. And this is a brewer in Yamagata. And maybe after this, you can pull up the map again. But this is the brewery that Ayaka was making. Okay.
Two strains. Oh, no. Hello.
Oh, okay. So the Yamagata, this is the one that Ayaka was working at, and you saw the pole going in and her mixing it. There we go. So yeah, Yamagata. So Yamagata is part of Tohoku, and you get cold temperatures. So anyone from any of the brewers from this region, Yamagata or like where Niigata, all these guys ski like pros. It's kind of like talking to Austrian winemakers. They all like heli ski, and they're all ski instructors a lot of the time. But again, these are cold places that they do this style at, because if it was warm, you would have some things happening that you probably don't want, right? So this is 1898, and that's the reference to the year that the brewery was founded. So back then, most likely they were making, well, definitely actually they were making Kimoto sakes. Yeah. This is a Junmai Kimoto, right? Akai wa omachi, and we'll talk about this more next week. But omachi is the name of the rice, and Akai was the exact place that the rice is from, and it's the most prestigious place for this particular rice strain. And this brewery does really enjoy using this rice. The water hardness and like that combined with omachi and like the brewer's fermentation style really go hand in hand. Yeah. The label was designed by this Japanese artist who did the what is it? It's like an industrial designer who did Vivro, not Vivro. It's a different kind of water. That Badwa water. Yeah,
I like the label.
it's fun. It's like a gourd, right? That they used to carry sake in from China. Yeah. So this is 65% polished Kimoto sake. I think this really shows the kind of creamy, a little smoky quality that I was talking about with this style of fermentation. It's not super umami at all, again, because Kimoto doesn't mean that, but you get a little more richness, probably also to do with the rice. The last sake was using probably a smaller grain rice that is less expressive, whereas this rice omachi tends to be really quite rich. Like you got like 6 sakes made with omachi rice.
I know.
Yeah.
That's the only. Thank you, Pauline, for suggesting omachi rice, because that was the only takeaway that I got. Like, oh, what does this mean? And then once I found it out, then I know exactly. The ABV for sake number 2 is 16%, and then sake number 1 was 15 proof. Oh, that's wrong. I definitely get that richness on the nose. Like you can see that, like it's like almost touching on butter, like caramel kind of thing going on. It's delicious.
Yeah. And if you go back now, whatever you have in your fridge, or you go buy a sake that's not Kimoto, then even on the nose, you would get just less. Like it would be more like if you're playing like darts or something, it just gets really like smaller of an area, whereas this, it has like that kind of buttery fattiness that even the first one you'll get more than a sokujo sake. Yeah, I like this one warmed, but I also really like it cold because you get more kind of sharpness with it. I saw a question. Someone said, "Do you have to pay extra for something?" Who was that?
That was Doug. He was talking about the polishing ratios.
Oh, sorry, what happened there? Yeah, okay. And then the third sake.
Oh, well, yeah. I've only got 2 glasses.
Oh no, you got 2 Jumai glasses though. That's pretty nice, huh?
I have 1 fancy glass and then
one Delta fancy glass.
Yeah. My day off tomorrow, so let's just do it.
yeah. But I started out by spitting, but there's very little in here in the spit bucket now.
I don't spit. I've learned 2020 has taught me anything. Don't spit unless it's like the morning.
Yeah. Why?
Yeah. You got lots of taste.
I think this one is the most kind of smoky, rich. So Tedorigawa, this is the brewery that Nick, you saw Birth of Sake, right? And on Netflix. Yeah. So this is
very sad movie. It's a very sad documentary.
Okay, so I stopped watching it partway through because it got kind of emotional, and I think I was in like a no emotional day kind of movie.
Yeah. But like again, I watched it years ago, but like you don't realize that like they brew sake in the winter and then they all just like commune together and spend the whole season making sake, and then spring comes and they go out onto the fields and grow rice. And it definitely a lot of the technical parts of the fermentation, but was like beyond me, but in terms of like their lifestyle, it was
Yeah.
very interesting.
It's quite hard. Like it's not easy, and that's why like younger people aren't choosing that path. And then the brewers that have younger brewers or want a younger team are trying to kind of like, I don't know, have uh, some more design to redesign their work processes so that it's not as like crazy as it used to be, right? Like carrying rice up and down the stairs for the sake of it to make you tougher is not really a 2021 philosophy anymore for a lot of places. Yeah. So Tedorigawa, if you go on their website or their Instagram, Yoshida-san's just like, and his wife are just super stylish, very attractive people. He's got a very nice like goatee, mustache, groomed. Their wedding photos were very beautiful. And the sakes are really good too. So this is from Ishikawa. Same prefecture as Tengumai that we had the other day on the Sea Japan side.
They're like right next door to one another. I saw
Yeah.
them on the map. They're walking distance.
Yeah. So there's this is the Sea Japan side, Ishikawa, and it's that long pink prefecture. You see the top part is Noto and the bottom part is Kaga, and that's one prefecture. But during the feudal period, that was two distinct places, two distinct countries with different kind of laws in place. But the northern part of Ishikawa, because of that time, they have a lot more sweeter sakes, and instead of soy sauce, they use fish sauce. Whereas in the southern part of Ishikawa, where this brewery is, and Tengamai is, and like other great producers are, the sakes are drier and more close to like Kyoto style because, of the kind of regional and historical differences there. Yeah. Noto is quite sweet. The sakes from Noto, the northern part of this prefecture, are rich and intense and sweet. Yeah, that's what they like.
Um, this reminds me of like Chardonnay, like Burgundy, a lot. Like just on the nose. I don't know. There's something very like wine-ish about it.
Yeah, yeah, and this is the Yamahai, right? So it's very not very, but there's a little more kind of smokiness I find than the Kimoto, the last two Kimotos we've had. That's probably one of the reasons why they call the Yamahai, but also because they've probably always been doing it that way. Yeah, but really, they have two distinct lines. The Tedorigawa is one lineup, and then the second lineup is called Yoshidagura, and it's Yoshida Brewery. So, and that is kind of a more modern style. They have some sakes here from the Yoshidagura line, and it's more like they do like low alcohol genshu and things like that. Norm says there's a good documentary about Noto called The Genealogy of Sake. Yeah, I didn't actually know that. I'll have to look that up. Yeah. So this one, Yamada Nishiki is the koji rice and Gohyaku Mangoku is the kake rice. I want to, point that out that when they give you the rice variety, a lot of times they'll give you just the Yamada Nishiki, just the koji rice, because that's the most important part, right? All brewers say koji is the number one thing when we're talking about sake. And then Gohyaku Mangoku is for the rest of the addition. So koji rice is usually about 20%. And then the kake rice, the fermentation rice, is 80%. But that 20% really has to, pull its weight and will dictate what that sake is going to taste like. Yeah.
This is great.
I love this sake because it has this kind of like fruity sweetness, but also a lot of acidity, and like they're all complex. But this one is a little more wild to me. And sweet and juicy. Yeah. You can warm it, and when you warm this, it'll become a little more milky. Milky is not the right word. Yeah, like creamier and more textural. But because the acidity is really bright, it'll still be refreshing to drink. Right? So maybe like if you have a warmer or something to warm things in and a thermometer, 45 to like 55-ish.
I'm going to do something that's probably not going to work. But there's a I don't know if you can see it. Ring light off.
I have a bottle too. Yeah.
Yeah, you got the bottle. 2020-07, is that the brew date on the bottle?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this one tells you 2020-07 is Seizo is the brewing, and then 29, so September of 2020, it was when it was shipped out. Yeah. This is really easy to read, which is great because a lot of brewers still go by brew year, BY, and that's BY is it's like a sake world fiscal year, and it starts in June of one year and goes into July of the next year, and that's one brewing season. So, and then the emperor's reign, like which emperor it is, that's how we talk about eras in Japan. So right now we're in Reiwa, oh my God, 2, I think. Yeah, Reiwa 2. Yeah. So sometimes it'll say like BY2, and you're like, what? What does that mean? Yeah, but this actually says when it was made and when it was shipped. It was very helpful.
Is that something that's important? Like, should you be paying attention to that if you're buying a bottle of sake?
Yeah, you should be for sure. I think like for example, Stu and like Michael Aki, these guys are very very what's the word? Like they pay a lot of attention to what they have and what they're buying. So when you buy from those places, you're for sure guaranteed that you're not getting anything over the hill or not tasting as fresh as you'd want it to. And there's an argument there for some things that can be aged, but if it's in the right condition and in the right environment. But yeah, you should kind of pay attention to that for sure. When I went to the LCBO, I definitely when I picked these up, like this one was from the LCBO, and this is 2003, so March of last year, which to be perfectly honest, I was a little bit worried, but it was perfectly delicious. So yeah, must have been.
When Stu says you have to drink something pretty quickly, what does he mean? What does that mean?
Did he say like to drink it after it's opened, or
so that
like when it gets here?
Banjikin, that other sake that he sold me, and he was like the green label with I've got the bottle, but he was like, you drink this pretty quickly, and I was like, I don't know what it means.
Yeah.
That by hours, weeks, months?
Yeah, the clock like 24 hours is counting down.
I just feel like with sake, there's a time like you reference time that I'm like the references are a little weird. So I'm like, I'm curious if I don't know. Like
that's such a big and good question that it really depends on the sake, and like this particular one, for example. I think if you had it, well, this is last year September, so if you had it like this year, end of this year, it'd be still delicious, and even next year I might get a little more earthy and rich, but it still will be in good shape. The ones that actually I think change the quickest and are less forgiving are things like honjozo, the urakasumi that I pointed out, that was sake number 2 last week. And then the added alcohol sakes change, where you can notice the change faster because of that added alcohol. It's because we're not fortifying anything, right? We're just bringing out some of the aromatics and flavors, but the texture is thinner. There's less acidity for sure. There's less umami, so they don't age when we're talking about those kinds of
I'm learning so much.
So if you're gonna, but if you are a little unsure, I would definitely stick with like Jinmai's, and Yamaha Kimoto is great because they do last. And one of the things, like I had a producer come 2019 or 18 maybe, and he tasted sakes that were his as well as other brewers in Toronto, and he really was impressed by how well the Kimotos stand up even after like 2 years, for example. And that's a really big like reason why producers would do Kimoto or Yamaha too, right? They're meant to last and like hold up, whereas the light styles of like the bubble economy that I was talking about, they have to be drunk in Japan, or like, even if they're exported within the first 6 months, or else I think they just don't have enough going on to hold up.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's really interesting, and like something I've struggled with, but I didn't really understand how to figure it out in my head, and so this helped a lot. It's great.
A really clean, well, like kind of more commercially made Pinot Grigio, for example, like an Italian, I don't know. I once had a 7-year-old Santa Margherita Pinot Grigio that was in someone's closet. And it was interesting, but not tasty, right? Because there's just like, it's meant to be like really sharp, really not that much going on, I guess, kind of is that. Yeah. So then they don't age well. But if you have more complexity and more acidity as well, that they can also,
You
wow.
know, I can respect that, because I was in Prosecco 2 years ago, and there's this conception that Prosecco isn't age worthy and you shouldn't age it, you should drink it straight away. And I was like, oh, that's just like marketing. It's not me. But every producer that I met,
Mm,
the 40 or 50, they were like, no, Prosecco is to be drunk soon rather than later. It's not age worthy. Don't cellar it. We barely put the vintage on it because it's not important. And I get it. Like, there are some things you just have to accept that fresher is better, and move on. Aging doesn't mean it's better. It doesn't mean it's worse.
yeah,
It's the thing.
they're different. Yeah, totally. Some things are meant for aging, and they're also like designed for aging. With sake, you can also do that, right? You have your intention and your goal to make something age worthy. Well, like wine too, but it's like those processes that can do that. Yeah. So this is the reason why I put them in this order is because even though they're all Kimoto or Yamahai, same thing, well, same umbrella. The Otokoyama, the first one from Hokkaido, is the leanest and like the sharpest. You find, yeah, right. So it's the cleanest. So Otokoyama means literally man's mountain. I hate that kind of name.
I
But
also hated that.
yeah.
I was like,
I was like,
I
oh,
don't
don't do
this.
that. Just call it Otokoyama. We can pronounce a few syllables. But there are quite a few Otokoyamas in Japan. So Otokoyama is a brand name for that brewery. I'm going to bring it back to that slide. This is Otokoyama is the name of the brand, but it's also there's quite a few breweries within Japan that are Otokoyama. And this was a way where brewers back in the day said to their customers, Otokoyama sakes, if I've named it that, mean they're like sharp and a little more I don't know what's the word, like powerful. Right. So there's a lot of Tokoyamas. There's a few other names that are common, and they weren't clearly protected by like copyright or what's the word, like trademark. But yeah, now people say, oh, Hokkaido Tokoyama, right? There's because there's others. Yeah. If you ever see another sake that is Otokoyama, most likely it's going to be dry and a little bit more structured. Yeah, than like a lighter fruity style. Yeah. So yeah, that was the first. So Otokoyama was the first like really clean, sharp, very precise one. And then the 1898 from Yamagata Masamune, this it has a little more richness and a little more like creaminess and smokiness, and that will come up when you warm it as well. And this is, I know this actually says 2019 9, and this is the current vintage. So these guys age their sake, some of their sakes, not all. But the reason why this one is 2019 September is because omachi rice, when you first press the sake after you brew it, it doesn't taste actually always that delicious. Like you need some time to come around. So it's not like an immediate consumption kind of rice often, and especially for Mitobe-san. So he holds it back, even though he has to pay taxes and loses money on it. He holds it back and then releases it. Yeah.
2019, it was a different time.
It was. Maybe now he wouldn't hold it back as much. But this 2019 9 is, it says when it was made, but this could also be when it was released, to be honest. So a lot of question marks when it comes to brew year and stuff like that. Yeah. So the lesson of the like dating is to go to trusted shops. And if you're going to buy from the LCBO, keep your receipt because you
And
can also return things if you need to. Not right now.
Can you also say like fresher is better? Like, is that a good?
Yeah, yeah.
rule of thumb?
The general, for sure, the general consensus is that most sakes are meant to be drunk within a year, maybe 2 years of brewing. Beyond that, it would be a little more up to the brewer, right? So, as a general rule, I would say fresher is better. Yeah. But you can, I'm picking up a sake from Izumi tomorrow. That's the Arawashiri, and it's Nama. It's like the free run or the first, free run. And I asked you if he had any because I just wondered. And he said, no, I don't have any of it fresh or on tap anymore, but I have some from like 3 years ago that he's aging. So yeah, he's chosen to take those sakes and age them in his like storage area at low temperatures. I think some in the fridge and some at room temp.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean,
So you can do stuff like that, but you
that's how
want to
gotta
do it
boil things,
on
right?
purpose.
Right. You gotta like, break
Yeah.
down the
Be a
idea.
fun tasting if he wants to share it. Yeah, I already said that to him. You want to share it? But so yeah, it depends on also depends on the philosophy. There's a sake brewery, a sake bar in Kyoto run by Yoramu-san. I think he's Persian, maybe living in Kyoto, and he ages sakes on his own. Like he'll buy big volume, age it himself, and serve it at the bar. I think he also exports some of it to Skurnik or someone in New York as well. And then so he sees the beauty in aging those things. And if you ask like a technical taster, they'd be like, no, that's this, that's this, that's this,
That said, Chris is on the chat or in the class. Old Prosecco is delicious. Like I was super impressed. There was one winery that had some from 2014, so it was like 5 years old. I thought it was amazing. Not fresh, not like that style, not the way Prosecco should be drunk.
Yeah.
But it had its own character that was very delicious. So.
Yeah, I mean it's intention and like what you find like joy in, So if you find joy in those things, drink them. Yeah.
Absolutely.
If you have space in your cellar, age your proseccos away.
I'm not gonna age the sakes I bought from Stu.
No, you can drink them.
Yeah.
But my Ernest, like our boss, he has a sake fridge beside his cellar, and there's some things that I tasted from like the 90s and things that really are delicious. Yeah, I learned some things about sake aging and decanting sake from him. And when I said that out loud after like 10, 15 years, he said, I told you so. Maybe you learned something, I think he said.
Who cares? Do what you want.
Yeah. And then the last sake was Tadorigawa Yamahai. And again, this one was bigger and like fatter and a little more wilder. I get a little more like bitterness as well and salinity. I think something to do also maybe with the location of the producer. But yeah, definitely watch the movie. And then I think I'll share the link on Discord. Jikon Sake, so Oni-san from Jikon, he posted a video a little while ago on Instagram where him and like two of his staff were doing the motosuri, so they were mashing the rice in the in the barrels. Yeah, I don't think there's any songs, but you can see the rice in there and the mashing. Yeah.
There's no G-Con in this tasting, is there? In this session?
No, there's not. We could. I mean, I could. Yeah, I'll see if we can do that. Yeah, do you want to?
Yeah,
of course.
So delicious.
Yeah, Jikon's always quite something. Very impressive.
Anyway, I digress.
And then the final question, why the trend? So yeah, every time I go back to Japan, there's more and more producers talking about their new challenge of making kimoto, or maybe they're just like revisiting that part of sake history. And I think, like a big thing is going back to basics, trying to learn what it is that their ancestors were doing. And also the sakes are tasty. They're more complex and they probably also have longevity. whether you're aging or not, or you're vintaging things, or you're just drinking them, they do have they have more flexibility, I think, in terms of where, when you drink them, or even if you open one bottle, you can drink them for 2 weeks or a month, and they'll change and they keep up because of the acid levels, the complexity, and you can warm them, you can chill them. There's so much you can do with them. Yeah. But I think the person who really started off this trend was Aramasa, who's not in Canada, unfortunately, not in the US, I think either. But he started using only yeast number 6, which is his brewery's like original yeast. Only does Kimoto, but makes the most collectible sakes in Japan. Yeah. So lots of reasons why it's coming back in style, but there is also a difference of like quality and styles too. So I would be aware of that. Thank you.
And for the wine people in the class, there's no correlation between how north Hokkaido is and the freshness of that sake to the house south, the third sake was the
Ishikawa, yeah.
Nawa.
No, I think so for sure. So the in Hokkaido, the food that it's cold, right? First of all, but it is a brewery that's originally from the mainland. So I'm not sure exactly how that history, the genealogy plays out. But the Hokkaido food is humble, but like lots of fish. But even if we take one type of fish, for example, right? Like in Hokkaido, you would eat it fresh, maybe a sashimi, or you make a soup out of it. Like my grandmother makes like salmon fishbone soup that's very salty, very fishy. And anyone probably living in this house probably would be like, oh, someone's making something fishy. Whereas in Ishikawa, they would take a piece of fish and put it between layers of kombu, of seaweed, and then, like marinate it, and then make it into more of like kaiseki Kyoto style, like very elegant, elevated. So yeah, in the north, it's a little more generalized thought, but it's farmers and fishermen. They're drinking probably more, perhaps as well. And then in Ishikawa, it splits north and south, but in the southern part, in Kaga, you get like samurais and geisha culture.
Yeah, it's the like centers of Japan and Japanese culture.
History, culture, all that, it's super elevated and beautiful. And Hokkaido would be a little more rustic in a different way. You drink more. I think to drink a lot of sake, I think it'd be harder with like sweeter, more flavorful, as well as like ginjo styles. You wouldn't drink, I mean, I do, but you wouldn't drink a lot of ginjos as easily as like a drier style. Yeah. You drink a lot of Pilsner, but it's harder to drink maybe like, oh, maybe this isn't a good example.
I mean, let's just plow
I'll just stop there.
But like, porters and stouts, the more fuller, it does make sense. It's not in terms of wine, it's not it's not that it's colder temperature that makes the fresher sakes, but the colder temperature gives rise to certain types of food and vegetables, and they tend to need higher acidity, like need sakes and beverages that have higher acidity, because fat is more important than sugar in terms of nutrients, in terms of calories, and so you have to create that balance. I don't think wine ever gets to that sort of like second level of like how culture defines a wine region. We always just talk about climate as the ultimate sort of cider of what makes wine structurally what it is.
Yeah.
But I think with something that's brewed like a beer or like sake, you have to add that cultural element, that anthropological element, to see what means.
Yeah, the human part of it.
People.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, and also like if you think of I don't know, like caviar Russia, you would have like a drier, like whether it's vodka or otherwise you'd want something to cut through that. And yeah, like one of my favorite things is roe, like cod roe, which is super salty. But if you have something dry with it, it'll go, works. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, Doug Cooper, is this Kimoto or Sokujo?
We're talking about sake number 3.
Yeah,
They're all of them were Komoto.
yeah. Today's sakes, all three of them are Sokujo. So, but the third one is Yamahai. If you remember, Yamahai is under the Kimoto umbrella. It's just like a more modern version of Kimoto. So, yeah, all Kimoto. And then on the sake list, would you recommend including the Brude? Ooh, I think that would be,
That's a good question.
yeah, that is very interesting question. I think that's tough. And then also there are sakes now that are vintage dated, and then you get into like, if it was a restaurant where the sommelier or who's at the table can really talk about what that means and translate that. But I think it'd be hard to, I don't know, for the customer to see that information and decide what to do with it. Yeah.
As an aside, in Japan, is it the sommelier's job to understand sake in a restaurant?
Um,
Or is there a sake person
yeah.
who does sake? I don't
I
know.
think it's only recent that in Japan there's sake places, sake specific places, like a very nice sushi restaurant would have one brand of sake because that's what they were like contractually obligated to, or the sushi chef, that's what they liked. But now there's places like Genbaimoto, where, when you guys go to Japan, you have to go there. Like it's a sake bar, and she pairs very specific things like food and sake together. But that's still few and far in between. Like, of course, I seek out the places that have sake people, but for the most part, you kind of like point to the brand and the style or the place maybe, and yeah, take a guess. Yeah.
Doug, when you open your restaurant, I'm going to come and drink all your sake.
Yeah. And as for the brew date, indicating the brew date makes me think of disgorgement. Yeah, that's kind of that makes sense. Also, when it was released from the brewery. So yeah, there's lots of things there. They're trying to, I think, centralize or make it the same way, the system, and what that means for people within Japan as well as outside of Japan. But it's a big question. Also interested with these bags. I find all the sakes I've had taste worse after 2 days. How are you able to pour these into little bags and they still taste great? Oh,
It's just kind of,
yeah,
I haven't found a wine. I haven't found a wine or a sake that hasn't loved these little bags. So
yeah,
in the one when I do these weekly tastings through my restaurant, and I've yet we've done Giberto, we've done Shannon, we've done Pinot Noir,
Pinot, yeah,
we've done Barolos, and from a wine perspective, the little bags have just enough a little oxygen to like open them up, especially when we were tasting Chardonnay yesterday and Pinot Noirs. And I think for the same reason that the sake stay fresh is that there is such a little amount of air, and but it's a like pouch theory. I don't know. Sample theory of wines and sakes is like a 2021 thing. We have
yeah,
we haven't figured out the rules. We're all experimenting. Like I'm waiting for the wine coach that I do. Like the wines that I pour are just horrible. Like knock on wood that it doesn't happen, but like everything seems to be working, and maybe that's just like the fortune of like I don't know 2021 helping us through, giving us the strength to like try
21
these
luck.
things.
Yeah.
But
But you use a syringe too, right? That gets right to the bottom of the bags.
yeah,
And
there's
so you're
very little
filling really
air.
up. Yeah.
I like pour syringe it, inject it into the bag, cut it off. I don't like I don't let I mean, I do it very quickly because it's very early in the morning when I portion all these wines off and these sakes off, and I don't have time. It's just like get it over and done with. I do like 400 bags a week.
You must be really good at it now. You can put that on like your resume now. Yeah. How many bags per minute?
It's gonna get rid of that extra 5.
Yeah.
Portion a case of wine in 3 hours. But I mean, maybe that actually that is a skill. So
yeah. But yeah, like there's so little air, and when you open bottles or uncork something, you have a lot more air in there than you would with these, right? So yeah, it makes sense. Very good.
I wish I knew the answer to that. I'm just glad for you.
I'm just that good, you should say.
These sakes are holding because I don't. There's no formula. There's no I don't know blog on the internet that's like, oh, this is how long things last in a pot. So
I poured sake into these jars that had the same dimension lid. They weren't like smaller or sloped, and they definitely tasted different than what you've done. So yeah, these are great. So next week is all about regionality, which includes rice varieties, styles, what that means in terms of like geography, but human geography as well, of course, is a huge part of it, like you just said. And yeah, there should be some pretty great sakes in there.
I'm going to start putting rice locations on the map.
Ooh, yeah.
You were talking, was this one, the Amachi? Like they put the town that the rice was from on the thing. I'm going to put it, I'll redo the map tomorrow and I'll put that town in Okayama. So that you know, I mean, look, the maps aren't useful except to just show you where in the world they're from and where.
Yeah. It's a pretty long country, so Hokkaido to Okayama, like you got totally different climate and what grapes can grow, not grapes, what rice can grow there. But also, I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, like DeMonte, Etienne Montes bought land in Hokkaido, right where my grandmother is, and the local newspaper was all aflutter.
Really want to taste those wines.
Yeah, me too. Doug, well, yeah, when are we tasting those, Doug?
I mean, he's not the nicest of people, but I mean, he makes great Burgundy. So let's see what the Burgundy, the Chardonnay and Hokkaido tastes like.
After they.
That was actually my partner Pete and I were supposed to go to Japan last year, and Hokkaido was like one of the places we were for a week and a half, and we were really excited. And I mean, we will go back there.
Yeah. You'll go back. It'll be like cheaper too, hopefully.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for everything, Marika. This was really wonderful.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, so we'll see you next week. So Monday's a holiday, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. Family Day, where we have family.
Yeah. And Valentine's and Chinese New Year's.
Oh yeah, year of the bull.
Ox. Yeah, pretty sure of that.
I'm year of the rat. I'm first.
Me too. 84.
Yeah, 84.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've had this conversation.
I think so.
Thank you, everyone. This was a lot of fun. Not actually. I learned a lot, and there was a lot of things I was struggling with when I was doing the map because I didn't understand where Junmai and Kimoto and Tokubetsu, how these terms interacted with one another. And like I absolutely understand that now. And it means that the maps are like my way of processing the information and relaying it to the world. So now I feel like super confident to like put these terminologies into a map and like make them make sense in my mind.
Yeah, and even if you don't make maps, like if you like a ginjo floral sake, then you know that if you see that word, you can pick that up, right? Absolutely. Most likely you'll like it. And then if you like these like earthy, bigger sakes, the Yamahais and Kimotos are great, and Junmais as well. Yeah.
Look, as a wine person, this is for me making a map has been a really great exercise to like lock it into our heads and we all have our ways of locking knowledge, especially when
Mhm.
it comes to beverages in our head. You just need to find a way that sake will lock into your head.
Yeah.
And like it's not as hard as it is. Like 2 weeks ago, I went from having one sake in my wine shop, and now I have like 4. And
Yay.
because I feel confident, and I'm confident that I can sell it. So like
Yeah.
I'm
Good
confident,
for them.
then you can also be confident, and you can also do it, and you can also sell it and drink it and buy it and whatever you do.
And last question, Krista was saying, how if you don't have a sake warmer set up, how do you warm sake? So yeah, you can use a pot of warm water. I have this like lacquer thing that holds hot water, but basically it's just hot water and something to put sake into that warming bath. It's like a bain marie.
I was tasting with Yuri from Metropolitan yesterday or 2 days ago, and she had like a little funny cup, but I'm actually going to look on the internet to find it. So if I find
The like aluminum one.
but
Was she at a meeting with that? Wow, good for her.
find a cheap way to like pour like heat back out, I'll put it in the Discord so that if you want to find a proper way.
Yeah.
There's also the suggestion of putting in the microwave, and I was like, I'm never telling anyone who comes to
Yeah.
get in the microwave because it'll only.
I don't think so. It's like, if you warm coffee in the microwave, it just like smells horrible and
Look, they say that you can put wine in a microwave
to
if
do what?
it's too cold and you need to heat it up. Like you can put.
Who says that?
I read it there, and I'm like, I don't trust any part of this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
There's
if
so
you're
many
in the
things that
woods
can
for
go
some
wrong,
reason.
and like,
Yeah.
but if someone brings me a really expensive bottle of champagne and it's too cold, I'm going to put it in the microwave.
I'm gonna put it all in my hand and warm it that way, like this. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone. I don't know if you have any other questions throughout the week. Put it in the Discord or send us an email. Mariko and I will answer it. I mean, I have nothing to offer, but Mariko will answer it, and I'm very grateful that she does so. And we will see everyone next week.
See you.
Ciao,
Good
ciao, ciao.
night. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Nick. Bye.